In March 2023, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations agreed to ditch the US dollar for cross-border transactions and promote the native currency. But what if ASEAN used a common currency instead? There are two ways a common currency can exist within the region. One is a physical currency like the euro, something that the population can use. But the second, however, is a virtual currency used only by the Asian monetary system. There was a proposed basket of Asian currencies known as the Asian Monetary Unit, which its goal was to promote greater free trade and financial flows among Asian countries and loosen the region's dependence on the US dollar. It is similar to the European currency unit, which was used before the euro in 1979. How it works is complex, so I'll skip it for now. So what are the pros of either a hard common currency or the AMU? To find out, we must draw parallels with the euro in the European Union. Primarily, it reduces transaction costs for cross-border business and avoids trade disruptions related to bilateral exchange rate fluctuations. This was evident in the euro area, where 13 to 19 billion euros in transaction costs and 70 billion euros in interest payments were saved per year since its introduction. Although 20% of trade in ASEAN is amongst themselves, if intra-regional trade increases, then this benefit would be greater, potentially saving billions. As a result, higher levels of trade and investment would flow within the region. This was also apparent in the EU, where trade within the EU single market had risen from 13% of EU GDP to 20% today. On a consumer level, because of reduced transaction costs and that a hard common currency allows them to easily compare prices in different countries, costs for goods and services would be cheaper. This was clear in the EU, where prices for similar products between countries is 30 to 50% less when they are a part of a currency union rather than simply sharing a fixed exchange rate. Consumers also save by not having to be charged to change money when traveling or transferring money to accounts across borders. On a global stage, it is possible that the common currency could have a great influence in the global economy, as central banks around the world will want to hold it due to its reliable reputation. Being the nation that has the reserve currency, it lowers borrowing costs as it would have high demand, increases demand for ASEAN products as it would be widely used in international trade, and reduces exchange rate risks as other countries would be holding significant reserves of it. The euro accounts for 20% of international foreign reserves, making it the world's second largest reserve currency after the US dollar, and its influence reaching far beyond the EU's borders. So if a common currency was used, ASEAN could increase their economic power and political influence in the world, just like the EU. This seems like it would be great for ASEAN, but what's the catch? What are the cons of them actually adopting a common currency? Well, mainly, it is that there is a loss of monetary autonomy for the reasons involved. Countries would have to give up monetary sovereignty to a central bank who would be responsible for conducting monetary policy for the common currency area. Why this could be a bad idea is because the various countries face underlying economic shocks that are dissimilar to each other. If one country faces an economic shock, it would make other countries in the currency union vulnerable to it. And since a common currency would have a lower flexibility of factor markets, it is more difficult for countries to adjust to these shocks because there is a limit to how much they could change their monetary policy. For example, the European debt crisis caused by a balance of payments crisis. Several Eurozone members were unable to repay or refinance their government debt or to bail out over-indebted banks under their national supervision. But states could have easily resorted to devaluing the euro, which would make exports from struggling Eurozone countries cheaper for foreign buyers, stimulate export-led growth leading to increased revenues, and in turn increase tax revenues for governments and reduce the budget deficits. However, Eurozone members were unable to devalue the euro due to it being a shared currency. This worsened the crisis, spreading to other Eurozone countries through interconnected financial and economic channels. Moreover, the European debt crisis demonstrated that a monetary union cannot function well without a fiscal union. The EU does not have a fiscal union, which means most decisions about taxes and spending remain at the national level. If ASEAN had a more flexible and sustainable fiscal policy stance on top of a monetary union, there is a lower need for each country to use its own monetary policy to respond to shocks. However, this needs countries to give up more sovereignty, and even EU members wouldn't want to do that. That being said, is a common currency suitable for ASEAN? To answer this, we must compare ASEAN to the EU before using the euro. Countries are better candidates for a currency union if the disturbances are correlated and small, and if they adjust to them rapidly. In the 1980s, figures show that Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore have similar disturbances, while the Philippines and Thailand experience more idiosyncratic shocks. This is somewhat similar to Western Europe, where shocks were highly correlated between France and Germany, and more idiosyncratic in Italy and Spain. Although the size of disturbances experienced by the Asian economies is larger than the shocks in Europe, the speed of adjustment in Southeast Asia is much more rapid than in Europe, indicating that ASEAN may find it easier to respond to disturbances than the EU. An optimum currency index was also developed, which measures the expected level of exchange rate variability between Asian countries based on these four indicators. A low expected level of bilateral exchange rate variability means a greater ability to forego the benefits of a common currency. Using ASEAN data for 1995, the expected level of exchange rate variability across Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand were all in the 8 to 11% range. This is higher than the 6 to 9% range across the major continental European economies calculated using the 1987 data, indicating that ASEAN is less suitable for a currency union than the European countries. However, it would be an exaggeration to say that ASEAN are very unprepared for a currency union, as the difference is not very large. The debate surrounding whether ASEAN should adopt a common currency is complex and multifaceted, encompassing economic, political, and social considerations. But what do you think? Should ASEAN adopt a common currency? Let me know.